they have to go someplace else.
Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over.
All right, CNN's Jeremy Diamond is in Israel for us and joins us tonight. Jeremy, is it at all clear what would happen to the Palestinians who live in Gaza? What would happen to them? Where would they go? And would this plan have support among Israelis?
Well, John, what President Trump is talking about here is forcibly displacing 2 million people from the land on which they live, moving them from their homes. There's no question that Palestinian people in Gaza want to see Gaza rebuilt, that they want peace and that they want security, but they also have a deep connection to their land, which has been evident over the course of the last couple of weeks as hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have moved back to northern Gaza, returning to their homes, even though they were very aware of the level of enormous destruction in northern Gaza. And so when President Trump says that this is an idea that's been favorably received by everyone he's talked to, he clearly hasn't talked to any Palestinians actually living in Gaza. Beyond that, of course, we know that the president's idea here has been rejected by both Jordan and by Egypt, not just because it could be potentially destabilizing for them to receive so many refugees at the same time, but also because the people in those countries very much support the Palestinian cause. And what President Trump is suggesting is essentially saying to one side of this conflict, you have to leave your land and just give it up for the United States to turn it into a real estate development.
Jeremy Diamond for us in Israel tonight. Great to have you there. Back with our panel now. David Axelrod, the President of the United States has now talked about occupying Gaza, ownership of Gaza, expanding into Greenland, taking over the Panama Canal. I don't know if I'm leaving anything else out here, but just explain to me again, how the world do you think sees this?
Badly, John, is in a one-word answer. Listen, I think it was telling when Vladimir Putin rolled into Ukraine and President Trump's first reaction to it, then former President Trump, was genius. And why did he say genius? Because if you can roll in and take another country, why wouldn't you do it? And the reason you wouldn't do it is because if everybody plays by those rules, you quickly devolve into global conflicts. Imagine how the Chinese interpret that as they eye Taiwan. If the new rule is that you can take anything you want if you have the force to take it, we are in for a very, very tough time in the very near future.
Beth, I want to replay a little bit of what Caitlin talked to the president about. Listen to this.
Where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision the world, people living there, the world's people. I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place, a living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done.
Beth, so much of U.S. foreign policy in the first Trump administration and even the Biden administration has been kind of this wink to Saudi Arabia over time, being like, we know that you want to reach some kind of a deal with Israel and we'll make it happen when the time is right. But the Saudis, can the Saudis countenance this? Can they countenance 2 million people in Gaza being moved out?
Well, let's imagine that, as Jeremy just pointed out, that many Palestinians will not go willingly. So that means that somebody, maybe the United States, because no Arab army is going to be carting people against their will out of their homeland. Those images will make it impossible for Saudi Arabia to sign on to the Abraham Accords. It's just hard for me to think about this policy not being contradictory to other goals. First, it makes it very difficult for Hamas to stick to this deal to release the hostages. Why would they sign on to a deal that at the end of it they lose their homeland? Then you've got the problem of the Abraham Accords, which was a main feature of this, and I think it complicates that. It could destabilize the entire region, which is also counter to the goals, because if you force Jordan by threatening to take away all of their aid and Egypt to get them to take Palestinians, you're going to destabilize those regimes. So less peace. And what about the pivot to Asia? We've just now committed to, just by National Security Advisor Waltz's account today, a 15-year reconstruction project at a minimum. So we're in the Middle East instead of Asia. So all these things kind of undermine the overall goals, I thought.
John, I think you correctly pointed out just the huge scope of this and the impact on humanity and human beings here, and also just the immense amount of power that President Trump is trying to take around the world and domestically. Who, what, or how can anyone stand up to that?
Well, you're going to watch, and Trump actually likes this. Every member of Congress tomorrow is going to be asked, what do you think about this? Every world leader who shows up in a public setting is going to be asked about this. Trust me, as I told you, two European ambassadors in the last segment on my phone. I'm up to 3 now, and plus the members of Congress. But no Republican will say it publicly yet. It'll be interesting. Watch the Republicans publicly. Remember, George W. Bush had that humble foreign policy. Can the United States say, I want the Panama Canal back, I want Greenland, now I want Gaza? And beyond that, John, think about what you were just, this conversation. How undemocratic what the President of the United States just said. Democracy is based on the idea of self-determination, one person, one vote. He essentially just said the Palestinians don't count, right? He said they don't. He can remove them from their land in Gaza because they've had it for a while and it's not working out, so see you, get out. We're going to take it over. And he also criticized the Palestinian Authority, saying they can't govern, which is a green light for Bibi to do what he wants to do, Prime Minister Netanyahu to do what he wants to do up in the West Bank and all that. He praises the general. He doesn't like to call him the president of Egypt because he likes to call him the general. And he called MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the leader of Saudi Arabia, a wonderful guy. He's a murderous thug. He praised Qatar. Women have no rights. Individuals have no rights. These are places without democracies. And the President of the United States, the leader of the world's beacon democracy, on paper anyway, is praising autocrats and sounding like an autocrat and dismissing democracy and people's right to self-determination on land the world says is theirs.
Aaron, a response to that?
I think it's hard to say that there's a lot of self-determination in Gaza and with Hamas at the helm there. I think that that's just categorically false, especially if you're a woman.
You don't take it away. Hamas does not belong governing in Gaza. Two things can be true at once. I agree with the Prime Minister and the President. You can't have a terrorist group running land. However, does that mean all those Palestinian, but do all the Palestinian people then forever lose their right to self-determination on their land because they have a terrorist problem? Fix the terrorist problem.
Well, it's fixing the terrorist problem, and it's beginning as a world to try and rebuild Gaza. That's also part of this. And really, that, I think, is the biggest crux of this for Donald Trump. It's the rebuilding process. He's also been talking about the United States not pretty much being the sole country who is out there trying to rebuild all these other nations. We need coalitions. That's a bit more of what he's trying to lean into, I think, here, when he's talking about who will help, who will take people in. I don't think you displace everybody from their country forever. That's not how this works. But making sure Israel maintains their sovereignty and that Hamas is eliminated are two things that are critical for world peace.
He did talk about a long-term...
He on several occasions, John, had an opportunity to talk about a two-state solution or talk about the Palestinians coming home. He didn't do that.
No, he was nowhere near the two-state solution.
John,
Guys,
we ought to, before you go, I know you got to run. Before you go, we ought to point out that he left open the question of Samaria, about whether the West Bank then also can be taken by Israel. And he said he'd comment on that in the next 4 months. So that would be the second piece, expelling Palestinians from that area.
And those are questions clearly.
There is a lot that was said today that is going to inflame a lot of discussion in the Middle East and all over the world.
David Axelrod, John King, Beth Sander, Aaron Perini, thank you all very much. Next, we're going to talk to Democratic Senator Tina Smith.